Okay, looks like we are live. Looks like we are live. Sorry about the camera angle on YouTube. I do apologize. I do apologize. Just quickly getting my recorder on for Spotify. Right. Boom. Thank you so much, everybody. Shake my hand and welcome to episode 20, chapter 8 of The Richest Man in Babylon. This is our second book in the podcast, Richest Man of Babylon. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's walking me through, taking me through memory lane. And we are really towards the last 3 or 4 chapters of the book. It's been a difficult book to read. There's a little bit of old English there. I completely understand that. But I hope it did not deter you from actually learning and really, gravitating, actually pulling out all the information that we actually need to extract. So the last chapter really was an amazing short story about the wars that took place in Babylon. And the main point here was at the end of the day, we cannot afford to be without adequate protection. You must protect your investments, right? Remember, this book, while written story after story, is supposed to give you a trajectory of your financial path. You are already doing the 10% rule. You are already thinking a certain way from the previous book that we did in the podcast. You already are the advancing man from the science of getting rich. You are already observing the laws of perpetual increase. You are completely obsessed with your goals. And then, because you have a definite purpose, you start to operate where you are now. Those were the rules from the very first book. Now, the second book says where you are now, there is always enough for you to take 10%. And if it's not enough, look at the 7 cures of a lean purse. Number one, really slow down on your expenditure. And he went on to talk about this, the cures of a lean purse. And then eventually we get to making thy gold multiply, protecting thy gold, making sure you get good advice on how to grow thy gold, the 5 laws of gold that we looked into, etc., etc. And then yesterday's chapter eventually said, look, in doing all the things that we've done so far, make sure you afford adequate protection, right? Adequate protection. All right, so I'm just going to jump into chapter 8. Chapter 8 is also not really a long chapter, so we really should do well with time, right? So I appreciate you once again for listening. Thank you for trying this crazy idea out. The idea is some random guy you've never met, or some of you might have met me if you're a trader and you're in the trading academy, sure. But if you've never met me, even in person, some of you have not met me in person, a complete stranger just sitting down with you every single day just to read one chapter of a good book, hoping to impact your life the way these books have impacted me. We've got a long year. This is not a 2022 thing. I'm very much committed to this, right? I really hope this is how I spend almost every single day of my life. If I can do it, I think everyone else can. Those who can't, who will read for them, as long as they sit through the information, right? So let's grow the podcast. Let's grow you. Let's grow me. And let's keep feeding each other, right? So chapter 8, the camel trader of Babylon. The camel trader of Babylon. Now, the hungrier one becomes, the clearer one's mind works. Also, the more sensitive one becomes to the odors of food. Okay. Talcott, the son of Azus, certainly thought so. For 2 whole days, he had tasted no food except for 2 small figs, purloined from over the wall of a garden. Not another could grab before the angry woman rushed forth and chased him down the street. Her shrill cries were still ringing in his ears as he walked through the marketplace. They helped him to restrain his restless fingers from snatching the tempting fruits from the baskets of the market woman. Never before had he realized how much food was brought to the markets of Babylon and how good it smelled. Leaving the market, he walked across to the inn, paced back and forth in front of the eating house. Perhaps he might meet someone he knew, someone from whom he could borrow a copper, that he would gain him a smile from an unfriendly keeper of the inn, and with it a liberal helping. Without the copper, he knew all too well how unwelcome he would be. In his abstraction, he unexpectedly found himself face to face with the one man he wished most to avoid. The tall, bony figure of the Basia, the camel trader. Of all the friends and others from whom he had borrowed some small sums, the Basia made him feel the most uncomfortable because of his failure to keep his promise to repay promptly. So this is something that, like I said, is debt. Guys, debt is a dangerous, utterly destructive thing. I can talk from my own personal life experiences. Debt is a curse. It is a terrible thing, right? So this guy owes the Basia money, but obviously he doesn't have enough money to even feed himself, right? He's gone without food for a couple of days. So the Basia is not really the priority right now in his life. The Basia's face lighted up at the sight of him. Ha! It's Tarkat, just the one I've been seeking, that he might repay the 2 pieces of copper which I lent him a moon ago. Also the piece of silver which I lent him before that. We are well met. I can make good use of the coins this very day. What say, boy? What say? Tarkat started, and his face flushed. He had not in his empty stomach to nerve him to argue with the outspoken Dabasia. I am sorry, mumbled weakly, but this day I have neither the copper nor the silver which I could repay. Then get it, Dabasia insisted. Surely thou canst get hold of a few coppers and a piece of silver to repay the generosity of an old friend of thy father who aided thee when thou wast in need. It's because ill fortune does pursue me that I cannot pay. Ill fortune will blame the gods for thy own weakness. Ill fortune pursues every man who thinks more of borrowing than of borrowing than of repaying. Ill fortune, bad luck, unfortunate financial circumstances, the problems in your life will always pursue every man who thinks more about borrowing than repaying. Come with me, boy, while I eat. I am hungry, and I'll tell thee a tale. Tarkat flinched from the brute, frankness of the Basia, but here at last was an invitation to enter the covert door of an eating house. The Basia pushed him into a far corner of the room where they seated themselves upon small rugs. When Koso, the proprietor, appeared smiling, the Basia addressed him with the usual freedom. Fat lizard of the desert, bring to me a leg of the goat, very brown with much juice, and bread from all of the vegetables, for I am hungry and want much food. Do not forget my friend here. Bring him a jug of water, have it cooled, for the day is hot. Tarkat's heart sank. Must he sit here and drink water while he watched this man devour an entire goat leg? He said nothing. He thought of nothing he could say. The Basia, however, knew no such a thing as silence. Smiling and waving his hand good-naturedly to the other customers, all of whom knew him, he continued, I did hear from a traveler just returned from Urfa, a certain rich man who has a piece of stone cut so thin that you can look through it. He put it in the window of the house to keep out the rains. It is yellow, so this traveler does relate, and he was permitted to look through it, and all the outside world looked large, looked strange, and not like it really is. What you say to that, Tarkat? Think as of all the world could look to a man a different color from what it is. I dare say, responded the youth, much more interested in the fat leg of goat placed before the Basia. Well, I know it to be true, for I myself have seen the world all of a different color from what it really is. And well, I know it to be true, for I myself have the world for all the different color of what it is, and the tale I am about to tell relates how I came to see it in its right color once more. The Basia will tell a tale, whispered a neighboring diner to his neighbor, and dragged his rug close. Other diners brought their food and crowded in a semicircle. They crunched noisily in the ears of Tarkat and brushed him with their meaty bones. He alone was without food. The Basia did not offer to share with him or even motion him to a small corner of the hard beard that was broken off and had fallen from a platter to the floor. The tale that I'm about to tell, began Dabasia, pausing to bite godly chunk from the goat leg, relates to my early life and how I came to be a camel trader. Does anyone know that I once was a slave in Syria? A murmur of surprise ran through the audience, to which Dabasia listened with satisfaction. When I was a young man, continued Dabasia, after another vicious onslaught on the goat leg, I learned the trade of my father, the making of saddles. I worked with him in his shop and took for myself a wife. Being young and not greatly skilled, I could earn but little, just enough to support my excellent wife in a modest way. I craved good things which I could not afford. Soon I found the shopkeepers would trust me to pay later, even though I could not pay at the time. Being young and without experience, I did not know that he who spends more than he earns is sowing in the winds of needless self-indulgence, from which he is sure to reap the winds of trouble and humiliation. Man, listen to this. Right. So that he who spends more than he earns is sowing the winds of needless self-indulgence, from which he is sure to reap the whirlwinds of trouble and humiliation. So I indulged my whims for fine raiment and bought luxuries for my good wife and our home beyond our means, right? So he spent more than he earned, did not live beyond his means. And clearly, whenever you're spending beyond your means, I guarantee you cannot afford the 10% rule. Most people break that based on that. I paid as I could, and for a while all went well, but in time I discovered that I could not use my earnings both to live upon and to pay my debts. Creditors began to pursue me to pay for my extravagant purchases, and my life became miserable. I borrowed from my friends, but could not repay them either. Things went from bad to worse. My wife returned to her father and decided to leave Babylon, seeking another city where a young man might have better chances. For 2 years, I had a restless, unsuccessful life working for caravan traders. From this, I fell in with a set of likable robbers who scoured the desert for unarmed caravans. Such deeds were unworthy of the son of my father, but I was seeing the world through a colored stone and did not realize to what degradation I had fallen. On our first trip, capturing a rich haul of gold and silks and valuable merchandise. This loot we took to Jinnah and squandered. The second time we were not so fortunate. Just after we had made our capture, we were attacked by spearsmen of a native chief to whom the caravans paid for collection. Our 2 leaders were killed, and the rest of us were taken to Damascus, where we were stripped of our clothing and sold as slaves. I was purchased for 2 pieces of silver by a Syrian desert chief, with my hair shorn and but a loincloth to wear. I was not so different from other slaves. Being a reckless youth, I thought it merely an advantage until my master took me before his 4 wives and told them they could have me for an eunuch. Then indeed did I realize the hopelessness of my situation. These men of the desert were fierce and warlike. I was subject to their will without weapons or means of escape. Fearful, I stood as those 4 women looked at me over. I wondered if I could expect pity from them. Sarah, the first wife, was older than the others. Her face was impassive as she looked upon me. I turned from her with a little consolation. The next was the contemptuous beauty, who gazed at me indifferently, as if I could have been a worm on the earth. The 2 younger ones tittered as though it were all an exciting joke. It seemed an age that I stood waiting sentence. Each woman appeared willing for the others to decide. Finally, Sarah spoke up in a cold voice. Of the eunuchs we have plenty, but of camel tenders we have a few, and they are a worthless lot. Even this day, I would visit my mother, who is sick with the fever, and there is no slave I could trust to lend my camel. Ask this slave if he can lead a camel. There is no slave I can trust to lead my camel. Ask this slave if he can lead a camel. My master thereupon questioned me. What know you of camels? Striving to conceal my ignorance, I replied, I can make them kneel, I can load them, I can lead them on long trips without tiring. If need be, I can repair their trappings. The slave speaks forward enough, observed my master. If you thou desire, Sirrah, take this man for thy camel tender. So I was turned over to Syria, and that day I led her camel upon a long journey to a sick mother. I took the occasion to thank her for her intercession and also to tell her that I was not a slave by birth, but by the son of a free man and honorable saddle maker of Babylon. I told her much of my story. Her comments were disconcerting to me, and I pondered much afterward on what she had said. How can you call yourself a free man when your weakness has brought you to this? If a man has in himself the soul of a slave, will he not become one, no matter what his birth, even as water seeks its level? If a man has within him the soul of a free man, will not become respected and honorable in his own city with the spite of misfortune. For a year I was a slave and lived with the slaves, but I could not become as one of them. One day, Sarah asked me in the evening time when the other slaves can mingle and enjoy the society of each other, why dost thou sit in thy tent alone? To which I responded, I am wondering what you have said to me. I wonder if I have the soul of a slave. I cannot join them, so I must sit apart. I too must sit apart, she confided. My dowry was large, and my Lord married me because of it. Yet he does not desire me. What every woman longs for is to be desired. Because of this, and because I am barren, and neither son nor daughter must I sit apart. Were I a man, I would rather die than be such a slave. But the conversions of our tribe make slaves of women. What think of me by this time? I asked her suddenly. I have a soul of a man, or I have a soul of a slave. Have you a desire to repay just debts you owe in Babylon? She parried. Yes, I have a desire, but I see no way. If thou contentedly let the years slip by and make no efforts to repay, then thou hast put the contemptible soul of a slave. If you don't care about your debts, if you're not communicating, if you're not acting on your debts, then thou hast a contemptible soul of a slave. No man is otherwise who cannot respect himself, and no man can respect himself who does not repay honest debts. This is like really hard, tough love, straight truths. And I'm 100% behind this because I was at some point in time, terrible debt payer. And that stuff catches up with you. Right. So, but what can I do, whom a slave in Syria? Stay a slave in Syria, thou weakling. I am not a weakling, I denied hotly. Then prove it. How? Does not thy king fight his enemies in every way? Does not thy king fight his enemies in every way he can, with every force he has? Thy debts are thy enemies. Okay, thy debts are thy enemies. She's saying, fight your enemies with everything you got. They ran thee out of Babylon. You left them alone, and they grew too strong for thee. Hast fought them as a man, and thou couldst have conquered them, and had become honored among the town's people. But thou had not the soul to fight them, and behold, thy pride has gone down until thou art a slave in Syria. Which much I thought over her unkind accusations, and many defensive phrases I worded to prove myself not a slave at heart, but I was not to have the chance to use them. 3 days later, the maid of Syria took me to her mistress. My mother is sick again, she said. Saddle the 2 best camels to my husband's head, tie on water skins and sandbags for the long journey. The maid will give thee food at the kitchen tent and pack the camels, wondering much of the quantity of provisions the maid provided, for the mother dealt less than a day's journey away. The maid rode the rear camel, which followed, and I led the camel of my mistress. When we reached her mother's house, it was just dark. Syria dismissed the maid and said to me, Dabasia, hast thou the soul of a free man or the soul of a slave? The soul of a free man, I insisted. Now here's thy chance to prove it. Thy master has embittered deeply, and his chiefs are in the stupor. Take then these camels and make thy escape. Here is the bag, is remitment of thy masters to disguise thee. I apologize for that. I will say thou stole the camels and ran away while I visit my mother. So he's basically saying, look, man, if you don't think you belong, you deserve to be a slave, and you're supposed to make something out of your life, here's an opportunity. You know, no one is around. Take these camels and escape. I'll just say you escaped. But for the most part, she's actually helping him do the escaping. All right? Now, thou hast the soul of a queen, I told her. Much do I wish that I might lead thee to happiness. Happiness, she responded, awaits not the runaway wife who seeks it in the far lands among the strange people. Go thy own way, and may the gods of the desert protect thee, for the way is far and barren of food or water. I needed no further urging, but I thanked her warmly and was away in the night. I knew not this strange country, and not only a dim idea of the direction in which lay Babylon, but struck out bravely across the desert towards the hills. One camel I rode, and the other I led. All the night I traveled, and all the next day urged upon the knowledge of the terrible fate that was meted out to slaves who stole their master's property and tried to escape. Late that afternoon, I reached a rough country as uninhabitable as the desert. The sharp rocks bruised the feet of my faithful camels, and soon they were picking their own way slowly and painfully along. I met neither man nor beast, and could well understand why they shunned this inhospitable land. It was such a journey from then as few men live to tell. Day after day we plodded along. Food and water gave out. The heat of the sun was merciless. At the end of the ninth day, I slid on the back of my mount, and with the feeling that I was too weak to remount, and I would surely die. Lost in this abandoned country, I stretched out upon the ground and slept, not waking until the first gleam of daylight. I sat and looked about me. There was a coolness in the morning air. My camels lay dejected not far away, but me was a vast waste of broken country covered with rock and sand and thorny things. No sign of water, not to eat for a man or a camel. Could it be that in this peaceful quiet I faced my end? My mind was clearer than it had ever before. My body now deemed for little importance. My parched and bleeding lips, my dry and swollen tongue, my empty stomach, all had lost their supreme agonies of the day before. I looked across the uninviting desert and once again came to the question, have I a soul of a slave or a soul of a free man? With the clearness, I realized that if I had a soul of a slave, I would give up, lie down in the desert and die a fitting end and for a runaway slave. But I had the soul of a free man. But then surely I would force my way back to Babylon, repay the people who had trusted me, bring happiness to my wife who truly loved me, and bring peace and contentment to my parents. Thy debts are thy enemies who have run thee out of Babylon, Syria had said. Yes, it was so. Why had I refused to stand my ground like a man? Why had I permitted my wife to go back to her father? Then a strange thing happened. all the world seemed to be a different color, as though I had been looking at it through a colored stone which had suddenly been removed. At last I saw the true values in life die in the desert, not I. With a new vision, I saw the things that I must do. First, I would go back to Babylon and face every man to whom I owed an unpaid debt. I should tell them that after years of wandering and misfortune, I had come back to pay my debt as fast as the gods would permit. Next, I should make a home for my wife and become a citizen of whom my parents would be proud. My debts were my enemies, but the men I owed were my friends, and they had entrusted me to believe in me. I staggered weakly to my feet. What mattered hunger? What mattered thirst? They were but incidents on the road to Babylon. Within me surged the soul of a free man going back to conquer his enemies and reward his friends. I thrilled with the great resolve. The glazed eyes of my camels brightened at the new note of my musky voice. With the effort, after many attempts, they gained their feet with pitiful, uh, you know, perseverance. They rushed on toward the north, where something within me said we could find Babylon. We found water. We passed into more fertile ground where grass and fruit, where there were grass and fruit. We found the trail to Babylon because the soul of a free man looks at life as a series of problems to be solved. The soul of a free man looks to life as a series of problems to be solved and solves them, while the soul of a slave whines, "What can I do? Who am I but a slave?" How about thee, Takat? Does thy empty stomach make thy heading, exceedingly clear? Art ready to take the road that leads back to self-respect? Canst thou see the world in its true color? Hast thou the desire to pay thy honest debts, however many they may be, and once again be a man respected in Babylon? Moisture come to the eyes of the youth. He rose eagerly to his knees. Thou hast shown me a vision already. I feel the soul of a freeman surge within me. But how far upon your return, questioned an interested listener. Where the determination is, the way can be found. Where the determination is, the way can be found. Where the determination is, the way can be found. Dabsai replied, I know, had the determination so set out to find a way. First, I visited every man to whom I was indebted and begged his indulgence while I learned that with which to repay. Most of them met me gladly. Several reviled me, but others offered to help me. One indeed did give away the very help I needed. It was a Mathan the gold lender. Learning that I had been a camel tender in Syria, he sent me to old, Naptu, the camel tender, just commissioned by our good king to purchase many leads of sound camels, many leads of sound camels. For the great expedition with him, my knowledge of camels I put to good use. Gradually, I was able to repay every copper and every piece of silver. Then last I could hold my head and feel that I was an honorable man among men. Again, Debasia turned to his food. Consul, thou snail, he called loudly to be heard in the kitchen. The food is cold. Bring me more fresh from the roasting. Bring thou also a very large portion for Tarkad, the son of my oldest friends, who is hungry and shall eat with me. So ended the tale of the Basia, the camel trader of old Babylon. He found his own soul when he realized right? He found his own soul when he realized a great truth, a truth that he had known and had used by wise men long before this. It has led men of all ages out of difficulties and into success, and will continue to do so for those who have the wisdom to understand the magic power it is for any man to use who reads these lines. Where determination can be found, the way can be found. Where there is determination, there is direction. Where the determination is, the way can be found. And that's the end of chapter 8, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you for sitting through another beautiful chapter of this book. Like I say, tomorrow we're doing chapter 9. Tomorrow being Tuesday. On Wednesday, we've got chapter 10. And on Thursday, we've got the last chapter of The Richest Man of Babylon, which means after this, we'll be moving forward to a new book. Keep following, keep streaming, keep watching, keep downloading, keep sharing. I appreciate all of you, but I know you also appreciate it. I hope it's working out for you. I hope you are starting to learn. These are irrefutable laws of world creation. There is a reason why this book sold more than 1 million copies, right, in its first year. It is a phenomenal book, right? Everybody shake my hands. See you in the next podcast tomorrow. Take special care. Goodbye.